We'll shift to the shared screen in a few moments. So I want to welcome everyone, and for our April edition of 440 Artist Talk. I'm James Acevedo, and I'll be the moderator today. And our show for April is featuring Robin Roi, her solo show, and entitled Coming Apart. And we're also pleased to have in the project space the show Seen and Unseen, featuring Amanda Michele Brown, Karen Gibbons, and Juliet Martin. And these are the shows that are currently on exhibit at 440 Gallery, and they'll be open through Sunday, April 28th. And we'll be shifting to the highlights of the show at any moment. But I certainly encourage everyone who, if at all possible, when you're in the area and you haven't seen this show, to come by and see this work in person. That really is the most important thing. It's a wonderful show. And the experience, and also coming in and saying hello to us. I encourage everybody for that. For our artist talk, the format is I'll be speaking with the artists and asking questions. And once the artists have spoken, we'll have a discussion period. But during the artist talk, so please hold your questions until after the artist talk, but feel free to, if you think of a question, you say, oh, I want to get it off, put it into the Zoom chat. But certainly after the artist talk, it'll be an open discussion. And then also I ask that the audience, while the artists are speaking, please mute your audio. And then at the end, when we go to the discussion, you can unmute. And so here we're seeing some highlights of the first the actual show, the installation. I think they are, well, I was going to say they're installation shots, but after the installation. And then we're going to be seeing some highlights from the reception. We're looking at the project space right now. We're following Robin's work. I think we probably can call this our first spring exhibit.
Amanda, can you admit? Because for some reason I can't advance it if there's somebody.
Yeah, probably can too.
There we go. Thank you. Reception.
So what's wonderful about the reception shots is that you get to see the scale of the show, the scale of the pieces, people next to them. Okay, so I want to congratulate Robin for this really beautiful show. Also visually provoking, the works in terms of their shapes and their materials, as we can see from the photos. I think of this as a very rich visual experience, but also mysterious. And I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion about what's in this work and also how it's made. From the press release, we learned that the theme harkens us back to the biblical beginning of time, and that moment of division that reverberates to the present. In the title of the show, Coming Apart. And Robin, to begin, could you expand on your thoughts and feelings about presenting this exhibit and its genesis?
Absolutely. Well, the story of Adam and Eve has always fascinated me. And actually all begin, I want to know, when was the first time something happened? I always want to know that. And as you pointed out, and as I pointed out, that this was not just the beginning of in the garden humans, but the beginning of division, the beginning of separation, of coming apart, of dichotomy, of everything. Everything has its opposite. Pretty much everything that exists has its opposite. And that moment in the garden, according to the story, of course, was that beginning when, we have up, down, in, out, male and female. And it also is the moment, you can't really blame something or someone else when everything is whole and one. There's nothing and no one to blame. So it's also the birth of blaming others for whatever, for whatever is going on that you want to blame for. You have to have an other. And so I think that's really interesting, and it kind of really brings us to this moment today where it seems like that's all we're doing, is blaming others for our lives, for what isn't working. So it's an important moment, and I think it very much relates to the world we're in today.
What strikes me about the work is what I refer to as the visual density, just how much you're almost transfixed by the work to kind of fall into it or be absorbed into it. And I certainly, I see the division, but at the same time, it's a great, it convinces me in its completeness, but certainly, and then another thing is, I'm very intrigued by the titles, and I was curious about the process that you use. Just like, did the titles come first and then you made the works, or were there the works and then you came up, you began to think, oh, I know what to title that. And then also, if there's a narrative, I understand that there's a general narrative, but in how it's presented, are we meant to actually go through it in a certain progression?
No, I don't think there's any, I don't think there's necessarily a progression, although it is very narrative, and it's a story, and I mean, that's a story we all know.
Right.
And but I don't know that one thing leads to another, but I do feel that the titles are pretty important. The titles are always a clue. For me, they're a clue. They tell the viewer a little bit more of the story. And of course, they can leap off from there. But I don't know, I can go through it and just say what the titles are. And like, this is called In the Beginning. And I think I sent some close-ups. I'm not sure there. Yeah. So you see that the story is embedded in these vases, and the vases are kind of like a column, and they're stacked up one on top of each other, like a column might be. And within the column are the images of the snake, and this has a pomegranate rather than an apple, but a similar fruit. And there's Hebrew lettering that wafts sort of upward throughout the piece. And in the beginning was the word. So I have Hebrew as the word. So again, that is the beginning. And let's see, the top one is called Happily Ever After, which is, pretty, a bit of sarcasm. And the next bottom with the apples is the apple of my eye, the letter I. And this is called As Above, So Below. And it can really be seen either way. I have it upside down in the show, but it can be hung either way. And then the center right is the garden of yin and yang. And this is the never-ending story. And I actually was thinking that this could have been the title for the whole show, The Never-Ending Story, because it certainly is never-ending. That's definite. And behind, if you go to that close-up, just go back 2, I think. Yeah, you can see that the story, the images of Adam and Eve are kind of behind the wallpaper pattern. So you're peeking through and seeing different vantage points of the story. And this is Cut the Apple in Half, and just really wanting to bring out that beginning of dichotomy, the beginning of the dual nature of our world. And this is called In Plain Sight. And it's, the images of Adam and the snake, the apple, and also there's a I don't know if you can catch it, but from here, but see the snake is biting the heel of the foot. And actually that's in the story of in the Old Testament version of the story. So these things are hidden in plain sight. And this is called Humpty Dumpty, obvious reasons. But I do think that that sort of round, that rotund kind of belly of the vase reminds me of Humpty Dumpty a lot. And again, all those little shards that are in the background are of the same, I don't know if you can hone in on that, make it larger, but the images of the story are in those shards. And this is called No Matter How You Slice It. It's sort of the same old, no matter how you slice it, it's the same old story, right?
And I think that we can see in the imagery, and this is mentioned in the statement, that you incorporate vintage wallpaper as in the backgrounds or layered into these works. And I understand that this is from your own collection. I think this is a fascinating source material, and I'm interested in how this has come about. Where do you find these materials? Or how long have you been doing this? And if there are any other material collections that you're using?
Well, I love paper, and I have lots and lots of different papers that I've collected over the years. But quite, back, I think I was actually just out of high school or in high school when a friend of mine, his father had a paint store, and he was going out of business, and in his attic he had miles of these rolls of old wallpapers. So not only are they old, old wallpapers, they were old then. So they were part of, I don't know, I think they're from the 50s, but they could have been even earlier. At any rate, I scooped up a whole bunch of these rolls, and I've had them ever since, and I've used them. And so all of these pieces have really as a substrate. That's the first layer on these is the wallpaper. And then I cut into it and, move things around and glue on top of and draw and, sort of massacre them in my own way. And I used the wallpaper. I mean, initially I used the wallpaper just because I love those old images. And I feel like wallpaper is something that you don't really focus on. It's in the background. You almost ignore it. You come into a room, you might notice the beautiful furniture or, the rugs or the chandelier, but the wallpaper is kind of the last thing that you really notice. And you certainly don't think about reading it like a story. It's just a decorative element. And I feel like it is kind of a metaphor for this Adam and Eve story, that we treat, it's something back there. Oh yeah, that we all know. I mean, who doesn't know the story of Adam and Eve, no matter what your background is, no matter whether you were religious, not religious, a different religion, whatever it is. It's so in our culture that it's so familiar to us that we really don't pay attention to it. We don't really consider it to be very important. And yet so many of the elements of that story influence our lives in a very, very big way. And particularly currently influencing, I feel, the way women are viewed, and they are really secondary. They are very secondary in our world and are treated as such. And although we've had great strides, you can see that this story has a big influence on us. So I like that the wallpapers kind of perform that metaphor for the way we treat the story.
I also like the way that the wallpaper kind of peeks through in places, and you become aware of something kind of startling, like the cowboys in the Apple
Yes.
work. As you examine them and you begin to pick out these things, it creates a very almost, well, I know they're not meant to be funny, but it's a very
I think it's kind of nostalgic.
contrasting. Yes, that's true. Yes.
There's
Like
a
the
huge
cowboys
element.
and behind Adam and Eve. I mean,
Right.
Oh, for my last question, I wanted to focus. This is more of a kind of technical question of in making the works that I see that that some of the works are actually, to me, they're like objects, that they break the rectangle. It's not just like a framework, like Never Ending Story. I'm really fascinated by these works, that they're kind of like sculptures, but at the same time, they're not sculptures. And I'm just curious how you actually make those, and how you feel about them as, are they objects, or are they paintings? Do you prefer them to the frameworks? Thoughts like that.
I initially, when I was thinking, sort of that picture of the whole show that I initially had, I just really didn't want the containment of the frame. It seemed to kind of, oh, what's the word I want? You know, almost like stultify it, like cram it into a frame. And I wanted it to be more alive. And so initially I was going to have all of them like this, unframed and shaped. But then, you know, I just went with whatever what it lent itself to. Some just didn't lend itself. That long thin one did not lend itself to being cut out. But these that are cut out, are, first of all, everything is backed very heavily with canvas, so that they're not fragile. They're not really as fragile as they might seem. They're pretty stiff. And on the back is actually a frame is mounted on the back, just so that it has something to hang on the wall. And they were just, you know, they were just cut out. After they have canvas on them, they're cut out, because the wallpaper itself is extremely fragile, as you can imagine, since they're from the 50s at least. So they need to be backed with something to hold them in place. So I guess I call it, you know how in wood, if you call it a live edge, I like that phrase, live edge, because I think of them that way. They seem more expressive to me than if they were contained within a rectangular frame, sort of, you know, squashed into a frame. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, no, I mean, I agree with you. I think that how you refer to them as alive, that's certainly, I think that's my experience. And also, I imagine that what you described as like putting the canvas on the back of the wallpaper and making the frame, all that must have been kind of like you had the idea, and then you said, well, how am I going to do this? And just
Yeah, I mean, I really was not sure at all in the beginning how I was going to, you know, have them not be in a frame. And honestly, it's still, even now, it's a little difficult to manage things that are not framed. I have to say, works on paper, not framed. And obviously these can't be rolled. So things like storage and moving them around is a bit of an issue. On the other hand, they can also easily be framed now. They could go, you know, if someone wanted to purchase it and put it inside of a frame, they could easily be framed.
right, I understand. Well, it's a wonderful show. It's a very thought-provoking theme, which I think there'll be lots of questions about. I congratulate you. And certainly I encourage everybody to come in and actually see these works, because I think just seeing the pictures isn't quite the same thing as actually getting up close to them and looking from the side, seeing them, and then spending time investigating these places, these settings that you have created.
Yeah, I think that when you see them in a slide, you aren't so aware of the layering that has been done on these. So you don't know what's in front of what came first.
Yes. And I tend to think that although the primary subject is this division that has occurred from the beginning, and perhaps I'm imposing this, I feel that as the artist, you've brought it together and what the value of art is, this completeness that we now experience. But that's my my good thought, my happy thought to sum up with. So, and just to repeat, the dates of this work will be on display through Sunday, April 28th. So 2 more weeks. So shifting over to the project show, Seen and Unseen. This is, each month we bring together 3 of the gallery member artists to display their work, and they meet and discuss a theme. They choose a theme for the show. And Amanda Michele Brown, Karen Gibbons, and Juliet Martin are presenting this show, Seen and Unseen. From the press release, and I quote, by looking, thinking, and being absorbed by the work, we discover things not immediately apparent that the artist left behind. So this is going to be the subject of our discussion. And I certainly think it meshes with Robin's show of this approach to viewing art. So we'll begin with Karen. Karen, congratulations. Wonderful selection of your constructed work. I'm interested to hear more about these works in regard to the panels. I know you often or in the past have just, you construct your work for parts. But these, I can particularly see this emphasis on these kind of like doors or frames, the hinges, and to me, I think of books and doors opening and closing, and I wondered if this is a new arrangement for you.
Well, thank you, James, and thank you for your wonderful questions and for taking over today. And I actually have done some series in the past that have hinged pieces. These are a bit larger than ones I've done previously, but it's not new, but it's interesting in this theme of our show, and also just the theme from that's kind of carrying over from what we've been talking about, the seen and unseen. Like the hinges to me imply movement, they imply duality of like open and closed are both possibilities. They so any kind of dualities are kind of contained in that idea of being able to open and close it, and even just the potential of it, of knowing that it's not static flat on the wall, is bringing another dimension to the work. At least that's my intention.
And as I think about it, there's a kind of implied action by the viewer, even though they may not actually do this in the gallery, where like they could open and close it. And I don't know, maybe that alludes to what you are doing when you're viewing art. You're actually entering into this intimate setting that has been created by the artist. I know, very, very thought-provoking on that. In your statement, you mentioned how you often consider making your work as being involved in a conversation with a back and forth with both the material as well as with the concepts. And I certainly see this, and particularly in the work called A Nod, that one we've first seen, and using that as an example. Could you talk about that, then the process where we see that, or that occurs in that work, from your memory of making it?
So yeah, the idea that it was movable was from the beginning. So first I hinged the panels on the side. It's too bad Susan's not here because she was the person that gifted me the side panels. The middle panel here is, you know, I call these found boards, and to me, it's a richer beginning to start with something that's found that already has life in it before it came to me. And so I attached the hinges, and with the idea of this piece imitating the religious altarpieces that were constructed in that way, that the altarpiece could be closed up, and then and it would have an image on one side, and then as you opened it, you know, more images would be revealed. And I actually included, you can see on the left here, Adam from the Ghent altarpiece of Van Eyck, and Eve is on the other side. And so it's so coincidental that they appeared in this piece. Just, I didn't know that Robin's whole theme was going to be Adam and Eve when I made this piece. But you were asking how they were constructed. So then the collage elements come in, and then there's painting of layers, first acrylic and then possibly oil. This one has oil, oil stick, and an oil kind of wash with, it's not really a wash because I use wax medium, but I put some pigment in the wax medium. So that's how you could see that kind of whitish layer of that kind of obscures a little bit, but also interestingly, from what we've been talking about with Robin's, I'm thinking about all the dichotomies, and then, you know, how to bring them to oneness, and how, you know, the image of a circle and the way I manipulate the layers of color. It's all in the with an aim to make it one cohesive whole.
Mhm.
And I hope I answered your question.
Yes. No, I think it's fascinating to hear, and I think you would probably agree with this. It is not as if the work is before you start, it's entirely imagined in your mind, like you see it and say, oh no, you know, I know exactly what, but it's that conversation of making that it evolves, and
Right, and sometimes I think I know what what it to look like, and then it's the conversation as it goes along, and then I hope that the conversation kind of continues, that the way, you know, the reason I chose the images and the way I put them together has a certain resonance for me at the time I'm doing it, but sometimes even for myself, when I pull out a piece that I haven't seen for a while, like different associations come up. And so in a way, then like a different conversation happens. And so I want the viewer to bring their own associations and have their own kind of conversation of what I sometimes call them near narratives, because I'm thinking, I'm formerly an abstract painter and abstract sculptor, and but always incorporating found things that I want some resonance of that found. It used to be back in the day when you'd find interesting detritus on the street. Now it's not like that anymore in Gowanus, but I would want, like, the, you know, if it was a gear, I would want the shape of the gear to be showing through, to give you some place to start your imaginative journey with the piece. And so that now my images are found, even though some of them are my own photos, some of them are found like on Instagram, some are found because like the altarpiece I had, an old Life magazine from probably the 60s that that's been like traveling studio to studio with me. And, you know, suddenly it was like, oh, I need this image now. And, but all the images are, I, you know, even if it's a printed matter, I put it through the copier. And so it's all on the printer paper that when you use acrylic medium with the inkjet print, it dissolves it just enough to make it more unified and to make it more a little bit painterly. And somehow I always have to use, and also it's always the same thickness then. So that's how I bring the collage in.
I also think that although you're using found materials, what may also be important is that the materials find you, you know, as far
Absolutely.
as if they, you know, I'm like, oh, it's, you know, I'm now aware of this material that somebody gave me, or a picture I've been saving, and
Right. And then sometimes people will know that I use found things and be like, oh,
and they'll
this is
get
exactly what you need. And I will sometimes be like, is it really? And but
I know what
then,
you mean.
you know, I politely keep it in my studio. And then one day it like my relationship with it changes. And I'm like, wait, this is perfect for something. So yeah, some things sit around for years waiting for me to see them in the right way.
Well, for our final question, I wanted to ask, in light of the title of the show, Seen and Unseen, and you know, I understand that, you know, of course, both you know, the viewer, you know, an artist feels that the viewer, they can see what they wish. It's not as if that's it has to be set. But I'm curious that as the artist, would there be something that you could point out in your work that you hope viewers do uncover as what is particularly important? Perhaps it's a material or an image, or how something is done, but something that you could point out that you would say, oh, this is unseen, but it is very important to me that the viewer understands this.
Well, this piece, for example, it takes a while to see all the pieces of it. And then at some point you may see the circle as having two eyes and creating its own kind of other face, even though there's a face on the left and a face on the right. You know, it might take a while to see the flying owl, but beneath the owl that's obvious.
Oh yeah.
Might be interesting to see that, you know, the remnants of the newspaper article are still there. And also, when I think of the seen and unseen, I think of like the dichotomies that I'm interested in, and that's like the conscious and the unconscious, or the you know, instinct and ego, and like what choices did I make based on instinct, and what choices did I make based on, you know, I know what this is going to look like if I do this. So those, like, that balance is always in the work. And so it's interesting, I think, when someone responds to my work, it's because they respond to those dichotomies, the seen and the unseen.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, and now that you mentioned certain things, I began to see them. I hadn't seen the owl that was flying. Well, very good. Well, thank you very much. I mean, wonderful work as always. I always enjoy spending time with your work.
Thank you, James.
So moving to Juliet. Also, congratulations, and thank you for bringing this new set of works. And Julia, we're familiar with your use of fiber in your work or as a primary element in your work. But I think that this is at first I said new, but maybe it's a different approach in presenting your work. I also understand it is in conjunction with a show that you're having right now at 5 Miles. But I'm interested to hear more about this. Do you view this as a print or painting? And what led you to do this?
Well, you could do it on one foot. And I had ankle surgery and was on my back, and you can't weave. Well, you can weave with one foot, but it's hard. And with the printmaking, I could, what could I do? What can I do standing on one foot propped at a desk? And I could reach everything. So that was the agenda, can I physically do it? But it does reflect, this is part of a larger collection, and the larger collection already had the iconography that's appearing in these pieces. And I took the drawings I was already using and then did monoprints on top of them. And I had this goal to make 100 prints. And so I did 10 prints a day, for 10 days. And the idea of them was to be part of this larger group, which I'll talk more about later. But I sort of consider them to be like physical prints. They're both digitally done and manually done, and then putting them on a block of wood gave it a nice sort of object feeling. So they're prints, but they're sculptures. So.
Okay, very good. I know also that your work often incorporates text as integral to the composition or to the to what the viewer sees as a kind of like literal message in the work. And here there is not that is not the text. What are your thoughts about that, and how this work then is viewed? Though I understand, it did have this circumstance.
Well, because it's part of a larger installation, the installation began with these small blocks, which I shared a few months ago, and the blocks themselves have literal text in them. And they also have the same iconography. Whenever I do a collection, I sort of make my own little emojis, which I'm going to combine in different ways to communicate a message. So these little emojis almost become that language that's missing. And when you see these without the text in conjunction with the pieces that have the text, you sort of get this visual dialogue happening between, with and without, but also both of them using the imagery to sort of convey a feeling or anxiety or discomfort.
Well, I find that the imagery that you've created in and I don't think you mentioned, but that it's a combination of monotype and I guess other treatments it's very intriguing just by itself, and if anything, I kind of like look into it and I see like the line and the layering as essentially like text, almost like I want to go in there and I want to read it.
Right, like the cockroach. Yeah,
yes.
The cockroaches on this, that's the language in this piece. It's the cockroaches, and like the salamanders are the language in the other piece. And this, like the they're communicating, and they're circling around each other, so they're sort of bringing on this discomfort with the two of them against each other. So like the images sort of take the place of the text and become their own language.
Yeah, with the, are they salamanders or lizards? How,
I guess, I did a Google search on lizard, so I'll go with
that's what
lizard.
you, right.
Yeah,
I was going to say that's the Adam and Eve of lizards.
right. Yes, this is my coming apart.
Yeah. Uh, So in your work, on this theme of seen and unseen, what would you want the viewer to dig in there to see, that might be hidden?
I think with the multiple layers and the changing of density of the printmaking, sort of creating this window that you're going into going into this ripped frame, and seeing all these in conjunction. And I think they're the kind of thing when you look, you see this image first, but then if you look again, you see sort of the anxiety and discomfort beneath what you're looking at, that maybe it isn't as pleasing as you want it to be. So I think what I like the idea of sort of like the tension beneath it after you get past sort of, let's say, like what you like about the way it looks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's very good, because I would say these are very appealing works. I find them very aesthetically pleasing. So now that you say that, and then also I do know your work, so I know the kind of undercurrent.
It can't look good.
Right. Well, I think they look pretty good. But I should also mention we've been referencing this other show, and I can tell the audience that Juliet currently has a show at the 5 Miles Gallery in Crown Heights. Is it Crown Heights or Prospect Heights? Where?
It's Crown Heights. It's right on the border. It's right.
Yeah.
It's right by there.
Yes, and that is a show that I have the information here.
These images are actually part of the greater installation, and so when you see them in the whole surrounding, you'll get a better sense of how these images relate to these tapestries and to these boxes.
Yeah. 558 St. John's Place, and that will be through May 4th.
5th,
And
yeah.
Tuesday through Sunday, 1 to 6.
Thursday through Sunday.
Thursday through Sunday. I have a T, and also information that it's 5miles.org, and miles with a Y. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll move on to Amanda.
Hello.
Hi, Amanda, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And I know that the process for making these, or for organizing these shows, includes a meeting by the artists to choose the theme. And so I'm curious about the background for this show and how it came about in the discussion that it would be seen and unseen. Like what information can you give us about that?
Yeah, so
That can be shared. Right.
it's a very secretive meeting.
Right.
For those of you who don't know, we select the artists before we select the theme. So we came into the meeting. I obviously intimately know both Karen and Juliet's work. So having the artist selected before you select a theme kind of creates a interesting problem of having to find those commonalities between works. And the joke in the gallery is like, every time we like have a combo of artists come together, there's always like, is this gonna work? And then it always somehow magically does. This one I think is probably one of the easier ones that has meshed, because as soon as I knew who I would be showing with, like, I immediately thought of the title for seen seen and unseen because all three of us are very process oriented artists. So in my head, part of the unseen is the work that goes into each image. We're also like very into layers, a lot of like building up of imagery. So that unseen is sometimes the elements that are part of the piece, but you can't really see it in the same way as you could see it when it was like initially put down on the paper or the panel or the canvas, whatever you might be using. And then the scene element is the obvious element, is that the end result, the everything coming together. So that was when we got together, I was like, here's my idea, guys, and it stuck. Even though Juliet threw a curveball to us by saying like, I'm not showing textiles. We were like, well, actually it still works great. Because the process point, the idea of how we approach art making stayed primarily the same.
Well, I greatly admire your work, and I'm intrigued by what I refer to as the atmosphere in your work, and that's to me kind of like the final the final image, which to me is a very calm and beautiful setting. And I know that your process is this layered process, or to tell you the truth, I'm not actually sure how these come about, because they look so complete the way that they are. And so I would be interested to hear you talk about, like, take one of them and say, well, this is how this one occurred,
Yeah,
or
well,
how I made this one.
my process with all of them is largely the same. I like to use watercolor. All of these are watercolor based, in a very non-traditional way, in a very juicy way. So I like to layer down these like large washes of color, in these kind of amorphous blob shapes. And that requires me, obviously, between each of those very juicy layers, I have to wait for that to dry. So even though they feel, when you're looking at them, they feel like they could be done very quickly, they're actually done over the course of multiple days at least. So in the time while it's that one layer is drying, I'm able to like start thinking about like, what's the next color, what's the next layer that goes on there. And sometimes I think I'm going one way, and then once the color's on the page, it ends up kind of switching and changing. For this series, it was, I did most of these pieces over the course of the pandemic. And so I think I was searching for that sense of calm and that sense of control and that sense of everything that we didn't really have at that time, and trying to bring that into the work. So that's why these pieces are a little bit more like earthy, a little bit more Zen feeling, is because I was trying to bring in what was lacking in the world outside to these pieces. And plus and even though like obviously there was that like outside tension, there was a certain amount of like being safe in your home during that time that brought a sense of comfort. And a lot of people like being forced to spend extra time with your family at home. It ended up being, for some people, a blessing rather than a curse. So they're going back to dichotomy. There is that dichotomy in that relationship to how we all experienced the pandemic that I was kind of exploring with these pieces. And I think the approach of that layering and like the thinking between each layer and the thought process that goes into it kind of helped bring about that messaging in my eyes, at least.
Mhm. With the layers of watercolor, what we're seeing, is it purely the transparency, or is there an actual mixing that occurs with layers, or a partial mixing?
So anytime you add water on top of like watercolor on top of watercolor, there is going to be a little bit of pulling of the pigment. I tend to go in with a very light touch, so that's why you end up getting more, it's more of the transparency than a mixing of the color. But you can see there are some places where it kind of does a little bit, like in this piece, where the yellow meets that like dark blue, you can see it kind of mixed there where it pooled, but then next to it where the yellow meets the purple, that's more of just like a pure layer. You have that like hard line that you can see. And I personally love when it feels like panes of stained glass, almost just like being layered on top of each other. Kind of going back to the overall theme of seen and unseen, having that like color that's underneath becoming the unseen and making something new.
Yeah. Well, I also think that there's a surprise, is that sometimes I can look at them and say, or assume that a certain color is under something, but then when I look at it again, I realize, oh no, it's actually not. It's just because there's been a partial mix, and or it's ambiguous. There are areas where it is a very mysterious, like where something is, or you can look at it and it goes back or it's both, in a way, it's both seen and then unseen. Like the proverbial, those kinds of images, like, do you see the
old lady or the young
right?
those
Yes. Yeah. Oh, and then the mark that is appearing.
Yeah, that's kind of the ever-present mark of anxiety. Or like the looming, it's not necessarily like negative, but that like kind of vibrating energy that exists in even times of calm. Sometimes people are like, is that your signature? And I'm like, I'm signing the pieces in the middle of my art, which is chaotic and would fit with the theme of the pieces. But no, they're just a moment of like energy.
Yeah. Well, I think you've referred to many unseen things, but is there something that hasn't been mentioned that you would hope that the viewer sees, that may not be obvious?
I think for me, I think it's the commonality between the three pieces that are being shown in the space. I've already kind of mentioned like the color palette, but there's also like the uniting color of that, like, I think I've talked to everybody about this when we've talked about the show, but like it was very much in a burnt sienna moment. So each of them have that like reddy brown color in there, and I feel like noticing that color to me kind of like speaks to the whole series, because it's like it's both like a grounding color, but also has this like level of vibrancy, and that juxtaposition speaks to me about what the whole series is about.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fun phase.
Yeah, no, they're very beautiful works, and as I think about it, watercolors, there aren't many artist materials where we are so aware of the actual materiality, that it's just water and suspended pigment, and often just this kind of earthy dirt. as opposed to, like, say with, I use acrylic paint. You become very aware of it as a substance. It's a stuff. And you kind of forget what it actually is made of.
Yeah, one of the things I like about watercolors is that it retains a lot of its chemistry, like
Yeah,
because no matter what you're adding this like outside substance to it, that the pigment reacts in different ways depending on how you put it on the page. So you can know that like this blue will move a lot once you add water, like this yellow is very stagnant, like you kind of get to know colors in an intimate way. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like,
yeah,
it's a material that, and I like to think of it this way too, that you kind of have to have a conversation with,
yeah.
kind of like what Karen said.
Well, maybe this will shock you. I mean, I do figures. I often see faces in these. So, like, so that's something I am seeing as the viewer, like peeking faces. Right.
Fun fact, that's
Yes.
a survival thing that we have left over from early evolution days, is being able to
Right.
see faces in other things is a survival tactic. So you can see faces in the bushes.
Yeah.
Going
Going back to the
I
beginning.
love the idea that it takes you back to your like
Right.
primal nature. You're like, that's one thing that like abstract art, you can't escape. Your mind wants to see the seen and the unseen.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Wonderful work.
Thank you.
So I want to thank all the artists, Robin for coming apart, her solo show, and I don't think I mentioned it's her second solo show here at 440, and then also the project space, Seen and Unseen, Amanda, Karen, and Juliet. And so now we will open up for any questions. I see that there's been a comment from Ellen. Beautiful work and interesting conversation. Thank you. And she had to leave early, but thank you, Ellen, if you're still here. But and other comments, responses, questions?
I had a question for Amanda. I know, so I know you're starting to work, or not starting, but you're working in glass. And I feel like when I see your watercolors that they're almost like two-dimensional paintings of glass. They feel like glass blobs. And I know you've talked about controlling these glass blobs, so you're making a decision as compared to just fooling around with it. And I was wondering, when you started with the glass, were you sort of seeing that in your watercolors?
Yeah, so I picked glass because to me it was I wanted to do more sculpture, and to me it was the medium that is the closest to watercolor, even though it's the most scariest because you're
That's what, yeah.
playing
Yeah.
with magma. But the watercolor has this unruly element, and so does glass. So to me, they were very relatable. I do think in the work that I've made since I've been glass blowing, I do see them in a more three-dimensional space. There's a certain amount of the feelings are very different though, because I like when I'm making my watercolor pieces, it's a little bit more zen and calm, and I'm like, oh, look at what that did. But obviously with glass, it's like that happens, things can explode. So it's a very interesting difference, but also they feel the same in the ways that matter to me. So I'm excited to see where they end up.
Have you made anything that you like feel good about, or like say, oh yeah, this is
Yeah, I mean, I originally went into it thinking that I would be able to, I think I had like a couple of months until my solo show. I was like, oh yeah, I can make a piece, learn how to do this and make a piece before my solo show. It takes about 5 years-ish to master glass blowing. So right now I have a bunch of wonky looking cups, but I'm getting better. So come back to me in like 10 years and I will have a show of just glass work.
Well, I look forward to that. I know it's a very challenging material, medium, but I think you can be the one.
Yes. I'll get there.
Yeah.
Just kicking myself, I didn't take glass in art school when I had the chance.
Was it an art school that actually had the facilities? Oh, well,
Yeah,
that's unusual.
no,
I think.
right?
Right. I think all we could do was welding. Right. Other questions? Nope.
See, Heidi has a question.
Oh,
You can unmute.
Hi, I have a question. I really love the white pattern. This is for Amanda, sorry. The white pattern in contrast to the really organic shapes. How do you do that? That doesn't look like watercolor.
It's not, yeah. I have done them before using like a masking fluid. What
Oh,
I tend to use now is like a white Posca pen over the top.
you could draw them on the watercolor?
Yes, yeah. So they're also a water-based, a water-based pen. So I'm able to like layer them on top, and it still has you can see them when you're in the space. It still has a little bit of transparency, but they're like just opaque enough for my purposes.
I love the way that is another layer of looking through, looking around. It's unexpected. It's still organic, but it's like made to me, as opposed to the other things that seem to have just formed. So it's cool to me that this is it's organic. It all works together, but one thing is almost like woven, the way a woven thing is made, and the other thing has this sort of flow where the water has its own form. Anyway, really
I
like those
love
works.
how you said that. That's exactly what I'm going for.
Really like those works. Thanks.
yes. Thank you for bringing that up, Heidi, because that is a very important element. I think that kind of contrast that is the an unseen part that's very well. I mean, we see it, but it may be overlooked, but it is very important.
See Joanne, go ahead and unmute Joanne.
First of all, I think I've been back to the gallery about 3 times because they're 2 incredible shows, and there is so much to see in each piece and each show. Juliet, first of all, we had discussed this a little bit before that I really didn't see that the printmaking, the 2-dimensional work, was such a difference, because I recognize it to be your work right away. I just think it's a new medium that you're exploring. But the thing about the prints is that there are so many layers. And I don't know if it's a vertebrae that I'm looking at in the background. Sometimes I read it as a tree in the piece. Sometimes I read it as bones. But I think it was probably the 3rd time I was looking at the show that I finally saw the horse, the one with the horse. There's the head of a horse. And, I sort of didn't see that the first couple of times. So I'm enjoying going back and finding more and more in each of the pieces. But as a member of the gallery, I did my shift, and I was there a few times when other people were sitting. And I think the audience coming into the gallery has been so intrigued by all of the work. I mean, the strength of the work and how much time people actually spend looking at it has been amazing. So I just want to say congratulations to all of you. And I feel like each time we have these talks that I learned so much from all of you, so just thank you.
Well said. I agree. I agree very much, Joanne.
I have a question for Robin. So one of the pieces, I think, I'm trying to remember the name of it. The one that's on this main wall right when you enter, the one with the cowboys. That one's a kind of a flip of the narrative that we know. So with that one, I don't know if anybody else noticed it, but with that one, Adam is offering the apple to Eve. So it's almost like a remixing of the story we know. In light of your talk about how the climate of the world right now in terms of women and how we are treated and the relationship to this story, is that flipping of the narrative your way of kind of rewriting, kind of reapproaching and remaking the world that we live in for women? What brought about that like need to flip the tale?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I think the solution is its opposite. I don't think that's a solution at all. And I'm sure I don't really have a solution. If I did, I'd be very famous. But I think I just want to loosen the story up a bit. You know, I just want to put some wiggle room in there. Because if you go back and actually read the curses that were part of the story, those curses are very much alive and well. Seriously, I mean, I'm actually thinking that is a whole other topic to deal with, the curses. But very much, I guess I just wanted to deconstruct the story and, you know, say, you know what, it's made up of movable parts. It doesn't have to be that way. I don't know the better way, but there are other ways.
I liked how you made the apple out of the cowboy's shirt.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I feel like that wallpaper in particular is everybody's, it can be very nostalgic for people because everybody's little brother had it, or if you're a guy, you had it, you know, in your bedroom. I think my brother for sure had the cowboys and Indians on his wallpaper in his room. So, and I, you know, wanted to choose something in my stash of wallpapers that had a little bit of, you know, maleness to it, and so that I could offset the male and the female, and the other side is a little bit more feminine. So it was definitely chosen for those reasons.
Karen, I was wondering about a nod. I wrote this in my Instagram, the question I want to ask Karen, in terms of how a nod is sort of bookended by Adam and Eve, but in the center, there's almost this Eastern subtlety and focus and nature. And I wondered about how you were sort of bringing those together and when you were choosing your images.
Yeah, so I guess when I'm kind of always like playing with dualities, but what is the purpose of the playing with the dualities is to find that oneness. And so that center thing is kind of like the path that, you know, the viewer's path, the path that the viewer is on. And then there's all these things, you know, historically, where we were, where we're going, you know, it's all in the mix. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Karen, on the same theme with Nod, I'm sort of silly, but I'm quite familiar with the piece. I can't remember. If you were to close it, how close do Adam and Eve get? Are they on opposite sides of the path, or do they meet in the middle?
Well, actually, they're obscured.
No, I know.
You can close it. Amanda, if you want to, you can close it. And you'll see.
But we know they're inside.
You know they're inside, but yeah, all that's really left is the path.
And they never quite make it.
Oh.
That's
And
so
and
sad.
your inner child is there too.
Yeah.
Looking out.
Who is that inner child, pray tell?
It's my outer granddaughter.
I also read some of the images in there as dwelling spaces, Karen, where sometimes I'm looking through a window or a portal, which I use sometimes in my own work. But it's funny because one of the portals to me turned into almost the shape of a house. So there were, I just kept looking at all, like I was going through ancient buildings and looking through portals to the landscape and so it was very intriguing, very, very intriguing. And I think all of the work in this show does that. I mean, we just keep looking and looking. It's like, I mean, not that I'm a great reader anymore, but I felt like I was actually reading a book or a story or and then the beauty of them is like poetry. I mean, it's just, to me, it's just really a great show on both sides of our wall there. So I hope more people get to see it. Yeah. Very touching.
Well, I also thought that the title can be also taken in different ways. Both as well, what we see and then discover, but that the unseen may also be almost like a directive to unlearn, or to not just accept, in a sense, what we see, but to spend more time in looking. But
I love
great
that.
show, great shows. I really enjoyed this pairing also. So any other comments? See, it's we've gone overtime. That very compelling discussion. I should mention what's coming up. Next Sunday, we'll have our 440 music event, me, myself, and I, with the bassist Jim Whitney. And this is a free event that begins at 4:40, at 4:40 and at 4:40, that we have once a month. And then the next exhibit on the schedule is acrylic paintings by Catherine Orrick, a geometric inquiry, and in the project space, Joanne AC, Fred Benheim, and David Stock. Looking forward to that. Oh, has a title? Have you chosen a title for that yet?
Mind's
theme?
Eye, it looks like.
Mind's
Yeah.
Eye. Okay.
That's been set.
All right. And that will be that will open on Thursday, May 2nd, and the reception will be, or the opening reception will be Saturday, May the 5th. And also, we are currently having our open call for the summer show Artistic Muscles, which is the juried show with the juror is Christina Massey, and that's it seems to me that's an open call through another through the end of the month. Is that right, Amanda?
April
Or-
24th, I
Oh,
believe.
April 24th. And then the actual show will be July 11th through August, I think August 2nd.
Yes.
And information is at our gallery, at the website, right up at the top. You can click there for anyone who's interested in submitting for that. And then, as we had mentioned, Juliet Martin is currently, her show, My Anxiety is a Love I Cannot Break Up With, is currently at 5 Miles Gallery through May the 4th.
I see in the chat that Amanda has a show as well.
And Amanda mentions the VAR.
In Milwaukee.
Oh, right.
Not local.
April 19th. So we have a few days to get there.
Yeah. Start
Will you-
back.
Will you be there?
I will be there. That's
Huh?
actually why I won't be at the gallery next week.
Oh, wow.
Hey,
Well,
Juliet will be.
Juliet is going to Milwaukee, or?
Well, she's covering. Yeah.
Yes.
I like you, Amanda, but I'm not coming to your opening.
Darn.
Well, Milwaukee is supposed to be nice.
The cheese curds are excellent.
Oh, I'm there.
What is the name of the show, or is it it's
The show is 30 by 30 by 30. It's a collection of 30 artists who were selected to make 30 works over the course
Wow.
of 30 days. So from January 1st to January 30th, we made a work a day. And they all had to be 6 inches by 6 inches. So it's 30 of those grids from a variety of different artists.
from 30 artists?
Mhm.
Wow.
Kind of an art marathon is what
Yeah,
they
it's going to be quite.
and some pics.
I will.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other announcements anybody has?
Gail and Lee and I are showing our collaborative pieces at Principal's GI Coffee House the first 2 weeks of May.
So it's 2 weeks away. Okay. Well, I'll make the announcement that I'll be submitting my taxes tomorrow. I'm very late and I'll be working now.
I've already spent my return.
Right. And while we were talking, I noticed that the accountant called me, so
Well, good luck.
yeah, thank you. Yes, yeah. All right, well, thank you everyone. Thank the artists. And if there's nothing else, see you later.
Thank you, everybody.
All right,
Thank you, James.
okay.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Amanda, Karen, Juliet,
Hi, everybody.
everyone else. Bye-bye.